What's up, friends? How are you? Welcome to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. Now, if you are a new listener to the show, hello, awesome to be speaking to you sort of through the power of technology. My name is Georgie. I'm a breathwork and performance coach helping people gain core confidence through the power of the breath. Now, a lot of you will have heard about my female breathing course that I was chatting about in one of the intros a couple episodes ago. I am so pleased to tell you that the course was an absolute hit. It was the first female-focused course of the Oxygen Advantage, and I was so privileged to lead it. And I'm so humbled to say I'm still getting messages today from women saying how mind blown they were by the simple things they didn't know about things like contraception, about breathlessness in pregnancy, how to tailor your fitness regime around your menstrual cycle, and how you can really use your hormones as superpowers, because that's what they are. You don't need to be a victim of your own body. You can truly use it to hack into your potential. So if you're listening to this and feeling a little bit of FOMO, do not fear. This is not a one-time course. I'll be releasing the dates for the next course very, very soon. Just make sure you're all signed up to my newsletter. I'll pop the link to do that in the show notes. But enough talk, on to today's guest. So today I have the absolute privilege of speaking with an amazing fellow Oxygen Advantage instructor, but she is so much more than just that. Her talents are just endless. I'm not even sure if I can squeeze them into this intro. There are so many. So today I am chatting to Conni Biesalski. Connie is a writer, creator, photographer, online filmmaker, podcaster, speaker, and entrepreneur. She helps passionate creators, writers, and makers with a vision transform and heal themselves so they can truly serve the world. Her work is an intersection of the creative process, mindfulness, psychology, and emotional intelligence. And her quest is to really answer the question, how can we live a life of purpose and create meaning for others whilst being at peace with ourselves? And that last part, being at peace with ourselves, was really the backbone of our conversation. We really started to dive into polyvagal theory. Now, for anyone that hasn't heard the term before, polyvagal theory is basically a collection of evolutionary, neuroscientific, and psychological constructs pertaining to the role of the vagus nerve. Remember, that's that 10th cranial nerve that really affects a huge number of regulatory systems and has an awful lot to do with the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, that more rest and digest side. But we'll get more into that in the conversation. And polyvagal theory has an awful lot to do with emotional regulation, social connection, and fear response. And we really got deep into this topic. Connie's knowledge of it is absolutely awe-inspiring. And she just really drove forward her belief that if we can work to create and to be creative on the level of our own consciousness alongside self-awareness, which is of course essential for creativity, then we can really grow and be of service to the world. We got talking about overstimulation and about the hype industry that has started to grow on social media. And we also shared a few tips with how you could start to explore your own forms of self-regulation, because self-help and self-development or personal development can be quite an overwhelming prospect these days. There's just so many options, right? Which journal do you buy? Which book do you start with? Which breathing technique do you begin with? And so hopefully this episode will shed some light on that. So quite a long intro today, but let's jump right into the conversation. Just before we do that, I do just want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe to the Just Breathe podcast. Let's keep on building that strong breathing community. The more people becoming empowered and inspired by the breath, the better. All right, I have nattered for long enough. Let's jump right into the episode. I really hope you enjoy it. If you do, please do send it along to a friend or family member that you think this could be of service to. And why not leave a review, whether that's on YouTube or on your favorite podcast listening app, and let me know what came up for you. What were your favorite takeaways from the episode? All right, without further ado, this is episode 58 of Just Breathe with Conni Biesalski. What's up, Connie? How's it going?
What's up, Georgie?
So good to have you on the podcast. Always love to chat to a fellow OA instructor, Oxygen Advantage. It's such a family, don't you think? Like, we've got people all over the world now. It's awesome.
Yes, totally. I love it. I'm so happy to be part of the family. So happy to be here with you today and to connect via the Oxygen Advantage family. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah, 100%. So of course, the podcast is about all things breathing, because breath is the foundation of everything, most important biological function we have. And I know you have a huge passion for the breath and for sharing the breath with others. But how did it all start for you? What kind of took you onto this journey? Was it sports? Was it sort of a big event that shook you, or what happened?
Yeah, we all have our story, don't we?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so mine goes like this. I essentially, my whole, I guess, personal development journey started in about 10 years ago, when after a horrendous breakup, and it totally shook my world. And it was rock bottom for me back then. And so I was in my late 20s, and then I really needed to figure out how to get better and heal this broken heart of mine. And I was dealing with depression and anxiety. And then as I started dating again, eventually I also realized, wow, I got some some issues. Turns out I used to be a very anxious, attached dater. And so then I stumbled upon meditation and Buddhism and started to go down the route of just exploring what's out there that would help me ease my pain, really, in my struggles. And so I, went from kind of dysfunctional relationship to dysfunctional relationship, and was really struggling hard with depression, eventually also with just some health issues. Some health issues, but gut issues, specifically SIBO and, leaky gut, IBS, that department. And then also skin issues, eczema, psoriasis, and on and off. And then, I was location independent, or still am actually, for a very, very long time. And so I was traveling the world and going to all the workshops and retreats and Dr. Joe Dispenza's and Tony Robbins and all the plant medicine ceremonies and all over the place. And some of this stuff was very helpful and definitely supported me as I was going through this really rough patch in my life, and some others not so much. But I also did a lot of therapy, a lot of talk therapy. And eventually, though, I was in LA at the time, and I was listening to some podcasts, and the breathwork kept coming up in these podcasts. And I was like, it was more like holotropic breathwork that they were talking about. And so I Googled it, like holotropic breathwork Los Angeles, and found this guy named Michael Stone, and went to one of his intro workshops at his home in Venice Beach, and just got my mind blown, within 3 hours. I was like, whoa, okay. But then it took another while for me to explore that kind of breath work again. And before that, I did my yoga and pranayama meditation teacher training, I don't know, 2015 or something. And, pranayama and working with the breath didn't really catch me. Like, I don't know, for some reason it just wasn't happening for me yet. It wasn't the right time yet. And so also being very disassociated from my body and I didn't understand the whole world of somatics yet, and so anyway, it took another, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. And then I was going through another breakup. At the time I was in Bali and living there. And so then there's tons of healing modalities that you have access to in Bali. There's all sorts of, practitioners and amazing people offering their services. And so I knew at that time, going through that breakup several years ago now, I couldn't just work on the level of the mind, right? And I knew I needed to drop deeper. And so breathwork kept popping up, and I reached out to a couple of recommendations and went to a breathwork circle. So this was, again, the more transformational kind. And then I did a one-on-one session, and then I was hooked, because it was helping me so much as I was going through this breakup and all that anger and all the sadness and all the fears. And I was just working through all of this in a matter of, a couple of months. And I probably saved myself maybe, I don't know, a year or so, which is what would have been probably the normal amount of time it would have taken me to process the breakup. And so I went to every breathwork circle in Bali, but also online that I could find. And eventually, as I got more and more interested in just the breath itself, and I'd started doing my teacher training in Canada to become a transformational style breathwork facilitator. I became more interested in the breath, and somehow explore. I don't know how I came across the oxygen advantage, but it just happened, and I was hooked and immediately signed up for the instructor training. And then I did the Buteyko training, and then I did a couple of other trainings. And so, yeah, it's just been a wild ride exploring the breath, and then just experiencing firsthand the healing potential of the breath. It was amazing just how it connected me back to my body, right? And actually helped me, because I used to be up in my mind all the time and so stuck in it. And really, that's where so much of my suffering came from, just from overthinking and overthinking and overthinking, and the same repetitive patterns over and over again. And so through the breath, I was able to connect to my body, to get out of my mind, and then to also explore the more somatic side of things as well, and to really understand how to process emotions consciously through the breath, but also beyond that. And yeah, so since then, just been a wonderful journey, sharing the breath in all its different varieties, and just been super, super passionate and almost a little bit obsessed maybe with the nervous system and polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve and somatics. And yeah, so here we are today.
Wow, man, that is quite a story. I love it. And the thing that really struck me throughout that was you said you went through talk therapy, and I've done some talk therapy myself, which was really, really useful. But actually I was the same, that I found the most effective thing was not to talk about or, put into words what my issues or problems were. It was actually just better to feel whatever was there, be with it, and get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And you talk about the vagus nerve and the nervous system, and there's something about learning to override your own stress response and respond to your own stress on whatever level that may be, rather than reacting to it and like having, a meltdown every single time something happens, overthinking it to the point of catastrophizing, something I used to do as well. And it's a lifelong journey, and it is crazy. And it kind of blows my mind still as an instructor with people when I'm teaching them, if they're really going through something tough like that breakup, like something breaking down that meant a lot to them or is very familiar to them, thinking, will this be enough? Like even as the instructor thinking, and it's just trusting in the work. It astounds me time and time again, how just breathing and just being with it without needing to talk about it. And I'm not saying talk therapy doesn't work. For some people, it's phenomenal, but there's something to be said about just learning to regulate just to self-regulate, just to
Mm.
be in your body, out of the mind and into the body for a second.
Sorry, I think that's actually a telephone that's ringing,
okay.
which I've never heard before because I don't really work this.
No, go ahead.
How do I turn this off? Oh gosh. Sorry about that.
Hey.
It's not my actual office, so I think I just picked up on, how do I turn this off so it doesn't ring again? Maybe, wait. It's funny when I haven't touched a proper phone in forever. And so
No.
I don't even know how to, okay, got it.
No.
Ring her off. Yes. Okay, sorry.
But talking about the power of the breath in terms of actually less is more sometimes, when you can pay thousands and thousands for every therapist, every healing modality that seems so huge and sensational, and then actually just breathing a little lighter, breathing a little less, and just sitting with it. Some people, actually, I have found multiple people, can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, if we just look at it from a polyvagal perspective, I mean, when we're constantly either in fight or flight, sympathetic mode, very anxious, overthinking, that sort, or on the other hand, we're in dorsal, right? We're in shutdown, we're very depressed, chronic fatigue, maybe. Those are two states where we don't actually experience a lot of safety. Let it be in our bodies, let it be in the world, let it be in connection with other people. And so what the breath helps us do is to actually regulate in a way to then, by activating the vagus nerve, to then come back into a ventral vagal state, or at least closer to it, right? Into somewhat of a window of tolerance again. And from that place, it's so much easier, more effective to then explore, what it is that is actually causing or, triggering all of these emotions and all of these thoughts. And so, and I think also on the other hand, understanding our nervous system, understanding how it all works, it kind of normalizes our experience. I find it really helped me to be way more compassionate with myself. Before I was just beating myself up. Something's wrong with me. The inner critic was strong when it came to my emotional experiences and the shame around it as well. And so then knowing about the nervous system and especially polyvagal theory is like, wow, okay, it's actually not my fault. I'm all good. It's just my nervous system trying to protect myself.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, 100%. And, actually, when it comes down to it, your body truly on a neural sense, which, to be fair, they talk about body mind, but actually everything is neural, because your endocrine system and your nervous system literally control every urge you have, every thought you have, every decision you make, etc., how you react to everything and anything. So really the only thing the body's interested in is, am I safe or am I not, right?
Exactly.
And the world, especially right now, can feel like quite a unstable, unsafe place to be. So in your opinion, how do we go about regulating ourselves with that? Is it the case of doing a very specific technique, or is it finding the technique that works for you? Is it individual, or do you think there is, in terms of polyvagal theory, an ideal technique that is good?
Yeah, I think, and that's an interesting question that I think I generally feel like needs to be talked about more, is to look at which breathwork practice should I choose, and then look at it from a polyvagal perspective. And so on the one hand, let's say I'm more in sympathetic mode, then, I might want breathing practices that help me down regulate, right? To come back into ventral. And that might be as simple as, let it be coherence breathing, right? Let it be 4 in or 5 in, 4 out, 5 out. Let it be extended breath. Let it be humming, anything that extends our out breath. And although those, I would say, are more effective in the moment, as a daily practice, I'm all about just LSD breathing, light breathing with some nice coherence breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, just simple, so effective. Like, we overcomplicate breathwork in so many ways as well. with all these different techniques and practices and whatnot. But even just doing that for, 10, 20 minutes a day is already huge. And then doing some, maybe coherence breathing or box breathing as you're out about walking, done. Some breath holds maybe. For those of us that are familiar with Oxygen Advantage, we like to do some breath holds while walking or running, but just keeping it really simple. I just found it for myself as an instructor, and maybe you feel the same way. There's this plethora of options, right? And exercises that we have and that we can teach. And yet, if we really want to stick to a daily practice in the long term, it's about simplifying it. And so that's for the daily practice. And then in terms of in the moment practices, let's say, I'm reading the news, or I don't know, I get really triggered and just get really anxious. The down regulating practices such as humming, such as extending your exhale, like a 4 in, 8 out, or even like Andrew Weil's 4, 7, 8 practice are great. Or the small breath holds on an exhale is great. But then what if I'm, some of us, and I've observed myself sort of going up and down in my window of tolerance. And what if we then crash into dorsal, right? And we get stuck in hypoarousal, meaning shut down. We feel everything's hopeless, right? It's like, well, the world is just
the worst. Yeah.
It's messed up. It's never going to get better. We're going down, and it's life threatening, right? Especially in some countries here in Europe towards the east, you might be feeling really hopeless over there as well, and thinking like there's nothing we can do, and threat is imminent, sort of. And so I think with that, it's difficult to just say, yo, just do some humming. It's like, if we look at the polyvagal ladder, then we actually have to if at the bottom is dorsal, is shut down, then we first need to climb up into what's next is sympathetic. So we got to first mobilize to then climb all the way up the ladder into ventral, where we feel safe and calm. And so my approach is to then recommend doing more activating breath work, maybe a little bit of conscious connected breathing, maybe just in through the nose, out through the mouth. And even if it's just 10, 20, 30 breaths like that, maybe do a little bit of a breath hold, but to just activate ourselves a little bit, maybe do 1 or 2 rounds, and then we can go into a bit of a coherence breathing to then regulate out our nervous system again. And generally, with all that's going on in the world, of course, we might be instructors and we might be teachers and facilitators, but of course, the cool thing is, it's interesting to observe myself as I'm going through, the ups and downs with my nervous system, and just seeing that once every time I just close all the news down and I just come back to my body and I feel the lower part of my body. So everything from the belly button downwards, feeling the feet on the ground, even just orienting in the room, what am I seeing? Really orienting to my environment, going out into nature, and then combining that with some nice breath work. I think it's in the simplicity of that where we find more calm and inner peace.
Just coming back to your humanness, isn't it? That's the thing. And I think that's such a good point, that we overcomplicate breathwork, yoga, everything. We try to turn it into a textbook all the time, but what is there a study that says that? Like, you sure that is it in for, what was it again? In for 5, out for, and it's like, why don't you? And I've even done it myself as like, okay, I'm just doing breathe light every day, and I have to pull myself back, and so I'll start doing Wim Hof or something, and I'm like, okay, wait, actually I felt better doing the breathe light. But it's interesting what you say as well. That's a really interesting point about going into dorsal. Is that correct? Dorsal, that I said? Yeah.
Dorsal, yeah.
Is that, would you put cold exposure in that category as well, kind of using that as a stressor to sort of shock the nervous system into a more sympathetic arousal, to allow it? Obviously there's the other immunity, white cell effects, etc. But talking purely in terms of sort of polyvagal nervous system stuff, would you put that in that category as well, like Tumo breathing, cold exposure, all of that? I know that
technically yes, but I actually think that those practices are actually too intense for people that are in dorsal.
Really?
So I would actually use those if someone's trained to do or does, let's say cold exposure regularly anyway,
Yeah.
then, if they're stuck in dorsal, then yes, but if it's someone who's never done cold exposure before, ice baths, anything like that, and they're stuck in dorsal, that's not something I would recommend. It's too much, right? And that's the issue with trauma anyway, it's too much too soon, and so, and it might just be a little bit of a cold shower. It doesn't have to be, 10 minutes in ice cold bathtub or something. So I think it's really about titrating, pendulating, and then also, I think but I think especially when we're in dorsal, it's really hard to do anything. Probably, many of us know what it's like to feel depressed. And when we're depressed and when we're in dorsal, it's really hard to get up and even take that cold shower or go out for a run, even if movement would be the thing that would really help us get out of dorsal. But isn't it the hardest thing to do?
It's the hardest thing in the world. And I want to come back to it's finding that less is more, that thing we said about simplicity, because I think this is also important in terms of those people. There probably are a lot of people in the world right now that are feeling this sense of hopelessness. People saying, I've never experienced depression, but I'm experiencing what I know to be depression, etc. Feeling low, numb, because there's, it's almost like, I'm not going to say better, but it's almost better to be frustrated and angry and it be there on the surface, because at least you're feeling it, and an emotion doesn't stay in the body for longer than about 90 seconds when it's like that. It's like passes through you, and it's probably the best thing to do is just scream into a pillow and wave your arms and throw something,
Totally.
And let it pass through and let it out. But when it's numb, and you don't feel anything, then how do you know what are highs and what are lows? That's crazy. And the question I have for you was, in this sense of coming back, do you think we're addicted to improvement?
Yeah, for sure, in a way. Yeah, absolutely. And looking at my own journey, over the years, doing all the things, I documented everything I've ever done in those 10 years. And all the workshops I went to and all the modalities I tried out. And, but it really came from a place of just desperation, and just really, really trying to find something that would help ease my suffering. That was it. And so I think that's why, the whole personal development, self-improvement niche on social media and wherever you look is so huge and so popular and growing ever more, because so many people are in a lot of pain and are struggling, and more so because things are, maybe it's just the time we're in terms of humanity, and things can't hide anymore, and things are just coming up to the surface, and at times in a radical way. If we look at it on a collective level, like it's pretty radical right now. However, and yes, when it comes to that, I also think there is a way that we can simplify things. And what I've learned on my journey is, and I could have saved myself a ton of money going to all these retreats and workshops and doing all these trainings, but in essence, and that's the other thing, maybe it takes us a while to get to, things like the breath, to take the power of the breath even seriously.
The simplest thing, even right in yoga. So I'm training to be a yoga teacher right now with the most incredible teacher called Simon Borgalivia, really well known in Australia. And there is a reason in Patanjali's eightfold path, right, that pranayama comes after asana.
Yes.
And that it is like you think, the breath, surely that's number one. No, it's number what, I think 5 or 4 or 5. It doesn't come till right in the middle, of that eightfold path. And that's so kind of convalescent almost with what you said about all the trainings. I've done the same. I've done all these different trainings and all that to actually just kind of find the simplicity and the nothingness and accept the nothingness as actually the most beautiful thing you could possibly ever experience. And I describe my journey with the oxygen advantage is finally finding space. I was like, I didn't need to sit in a chair and talk to anyone. I had nothing to prove. I didn't need to be anyone or label myself as anything. I was just in space. And from there, I think you're right that climbing the ladder, that if you can come back to neutral, then you're in a position to make a choice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because then our prefrontal cortex is online. Right. Whereas when we're in sympathetic or dorsal, we're governed by our amygdala and our limbic, our lizard brain, and
almost incoherent, right?
Yeah. So, which I think is also the reason why so many of us, we spend so much money on all these workshops and trainings and whatnot, because those decisions are mainly governed by probably our lizard brain that really, really needs some help, to be and needs to be regulated. So, yeah, and I think that I mean, if I was to condense it all, to really say, okay, what is it that's really helped me, then definitely meditation, Buddhism, it was for me back then, and yoga were like entry-level gates for me, and then, yes, I did all the talk therapy and all the Joe Dispenzas and whatever, and that was great, and it had its place, and however, I think in the end, working with a somatic experiencing therapist, so any sort of somatic psychotherapist, someone that doesn't, like, it's not just about talking, and but that actually helps you to get down to somatic level, that someone that helps you access your emotions in your body in a safe way for you to process them, and that in combination with breath work. I think those are the two main ones, and I think breathwork in and of itself is a huge piece, I think, on our healing journey, because as like, if we look at the pyramid of, let's say, mental, emotional, and physical health, I think with, let's say, diet and movement, functional breathing is like the foundation, right? If we don't have functional breathing going, you can probably do, like, if you're constantly over breathing, right, and you have a dysfunctional breathing pattern, then you can probably do all of the therapy and all of the psychedelics in the world, but we gotta relax your breathing and get it to work properly. And so that with that something, because a lot of the personal development modalities and a lot of the techniques and is very much geared towards self-regulation, and meaning we're like this isolated entity in this vortex, but actually also coming from polyvagal theory, the importance of co-regulation and actually reaching out, because a lot of the traumas and a lot of the root causes of us experiencing dysregulation, they come from dysregulation in relationship at some point in our lives. Every trauma is relational, right? And so we can do a lot of work on our own, and I did a lot of work on my own, and sat in meditation, doing my breath work and all the things. However, for example, because a lot of my issues were in relationships, and a lot of the anxieties came through in when I was dating. And so eventually then, as when I met my now partner, and she's more on the secure side of attachment, we were then able to co-regulate, and after, a little bit of back and forth in the beginning, of course, and a couple therapy sessions, it was so much easier for me to then come into a consistent, regulated nervous system in relationship. But I don't think I would have been able to do that on my own. It's something that I needed to do in relationship with someone else.
You need to put yourself in the situation to be able to figure the situation out. Like you can say, if you're imagining a swimming race, you can sit and imagine being in the pool, what the water feels like, doing it all you like. But until you get in that pool and actually just swim some lengths, you're not actually going to get better at swimming. And so it's the whole same thing with relationships. And it's such an incredible point, actually, that at some point you have to leap and trust that the net will appear. And I know that's a Buddhist saying as well, and just like the whole start before you're ready thing, all of that, whatever you want to do, whether it's relationships, a business, a sporting venture, of just do it to see what's, unless of course it's going to cause you or others serious harm, do it and see what happens. You know, that we, at the same time we're talking about the body feeling unsafe and in a state of stress, we also live in a world that is hyper focused on safety, and so much so that there's safety regulations are almost stressing everyone out more, because people cannot actually
find it within.
Yeah,
right?
people can't find it within, and they're so restricted in what they can do because everything is dangerous.
Yes.
You see it in children a lot, right? Don't climb that tree. Don't touch that, it's dirty. Don't do this. And it's like, oh man, like I fell out trees, ate dirt, God knows what when I was a child, and I know that was important.
Well, I think that's projecting, right, the insecurity, the lack of safety in the parent, then projecting that on and passing that on to the children. And I think, you know, coming back to the idea of co-regulation, and that starts with our parents, right? That's how we learn what regulation is. And if our parents are not regulated, if they have a dysregulated nervous system, and that starts in the womb, right, as a fetus. And so if our mother's dysregulated when she's pregnant, or when they are pregnant, and, you know, and then there's, you know, the birth process, and there's could be a lot of dysregulation there, and a lot of birth traumas that happen there. Because a lot of people always say, oh, just look at a newborn baby and see how they're breathing perfectly. I'm like, yo, do you know how many babies have birth traumas or prenatal traumas that are born already with a dysfunctional breathing pattern? But anyway, and then of course, you know, we grow up, and then the first few years are so crucial when it comes to regulation. And if we don't learn how to self-regulate, if our parents are not able to co-regulate with us when we're angry, when we're sad, when we're scared, when they're like, oh, stop being scared, right? Or you know, or when our anger is being shut down as something bad, you know,
don't make a fuss.
We never learn how to regulate. Yeah, exactly. And so, and then later on in life, and that's the other question, you know how they say you are the 5 people that you surround yourself with, or you are the average of the 5. Well, you're also the average of the 5 nervous systems that you surround yourself with. Yeah. So who are the 5 nervous systems that you interact with the most, right? Because co-regulation really means the effect that we have on each other, right? And how the effect that my nervous system has on your nervous system, right? As we're talking now, or in relationship, and so on. And so it's quite fascinating, because if we're only surrounded by other sympathetic, dominant nervous systems, my guess is that, you know, you're probably also more sympathetic dominant. Right.
And again, you can eat all the kale you want. You can do all the Bikram, all the pasta, vinyasa,
especially all of that, the type A's.
All the stuff that you like. Go to every CrossFit gym in the country. But if you every single day are only, you know, feeding your body, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, with that kind of stimulation, it's going to rub off on you at some point. And, you know, it's so interesting, that co-regulation that you say, because personal development doesn't really scream that word, but actually we are not made to exist as human beings to act as only individuals. We're made to be a collective, right?
Exactly. And that's where the issue comes in with the disconnection, and especially with, you know, and, you know, considering the last couple of years, and just the effect that that had on mental, emotional, and physical health, just from that perspective. It's just not natural to live in isolation. And I mean, I feel so much for people who live alone or have lived alone in the last couple of years, you know, and barely had the chance to connect with people in person, let alone have, you know, body contact and touch each other. And so, yeah, it's intense. But then, you know, learning about polyvagal theory and the nervous system and co-regulation, and I just really hope that the more we can share and educate people on this, that the more, you know, we can evolve also as a human species in a way, you know.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's that collective consciousness, right? The work of heart math is incredible in terms of this on a sort of quantum level, those frequency. We are electrical beings, that we can literally feel each other's frequency, and we are affected by someone else's frequency. And a lot of people listening might even go, that's so woo-woo. And it's like, no, it's really not nowadays.
It's really not.
Now in the science, you know, is that we all have a frequency. There is a collective frequency. There is your frequency. And it is affected by everything that is your experience every single day. And so, you know, that whole constant self-regulation, really, it has everything to do with aging, with health, with, gosh, who we are attracting into our lives. You know, it is enormous. And, you know, that sounds quite dark, but actually I think it's a great vision of hope.
Yes.
That we have this power to connect without saying anything at all.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I love that. And I also wanted to just briefly come back to what, you know, you were also saying, and you mentioned like Wim Hof and people doing Bikram yoga and like all the intense stuff and going to CrossFit gyms and whatnot. And I think also with the more down-regulating practices, and that's why I love also the work by Patrick so much. And I also really appreciate and I really respect him for not, you know, kind of talking bad about Wim Hof method, for example. Like he would not officially say anything bad about Wim Hof, but you can read it in the nuance of how he explains his work in comparison to Wim Hof. And anyway, and because I did Wim Hof, you know, a few years ago, also like for a while, because I was dealing with my gut issues and my skin issues, and I read, you know, his book, and I was like, well, that's got to be it, right? And so I breathed hard and I took all the cold showers for 3 months, but nothing was really helping. It actually made things a bit worse because it's highly activating. And the more I was in sympathetic, the worse my skin became. And so it wasn't actually until I really embraced the more down-regulating practices. And because that's the thing, like so many of us are in sympathetic mode anyway all the time. And I'm also not saying that Wim Hof is per se bad.
No. For, you know, it's been incredible for some people that like need a bit of a get up and go because they maybe have more of a hypoactive nervous system naturally without any emotional influence. But like myself, I am hyperactive naturally. And so then doing Wim Hof just makes me anxious because I'm just going over the edge of sympathetic.
Yeah. And what I did a while ago now is I went on Facebook and I entered all the Facebook groups that had to do with Wim Hof breathing and the Wim Hof method, because I wanted to see what's going on in there, and more out of curiosity than actually participating or actually wanting to do the practice anymore. And then I keep seeing so many people who struggle doing the Wim Hof method, and then they post in there. And I mean, some of the posts are horrendous with some of the experience that people have. However, they stick to it and they keep doing it because they're hoping they will get the results that they've read about in the book, you know, and they see all these people, you know, whatever. And I'm sure there are great, you know, of course, great results, you know, that people are having. But a lot of people aren't having that because what their nervous system needs is actually very different.
It's so individual. Yeah. 100%.
I find it a bit difficult because it's not a very trauma-informed practice. And I think it's just like a one-size-fits-all approach, which is why I'm such a huge fan of Oxygen Advantage, of Buteyko, you know, and also, you know, I did my neurodynamic or more transformational breathwork training, you know, and by learning, you know, with Patrick, and I realized again that, you know, more and more so the effects of conscious connected breathing on people and who's it for and who's it maybe not for, and especially doing, you know, one-on-ones with people or one-on-one coaching programs, you know, and then kind of gauging, you know, where's their nervous system at, and being more in a place where I can really make better decisions as a coach and as a facilitator as to when I'm going to introduce something like conscious connected breathing, right? Yeah. Or Wim Hof breathing or whatever. And I think literally, I mean, I think anyone out there who calls themselves a breath worker, a breathwork facilitator, whatever, should do either Buteyko or Oxygen Advantage instructor training.
I agree because, this is what I say to my clients as well, I will not introduce any form of conscious connected Tumo style breathing until week 5, week 6, because they need to establish functional breathing habits in the other 23 hours of the day to get the most out of that method and learn to come to neutral or at least close to it, to then actually go through that method. And it's interesting you're talking about these people posting in the Facebook group, because obviously they're missing maybe the most crucial pillar of breathwork, which is awareness.
Yes. Yes,
which
exactly.
is, you know, assess, analyze, and guide, right? Which is kind of a classic coaching term of like, you can also use it on yourself. And with any area of life, assess, are the people I'm spending time with benefiting me? Are they giving me energy, or are they draining my energy? Okay, analyze. Is there something I could shift about this? The same with your breath work. Is it giving me energy? Do I feel good afterwards, or do I feel depleted? Like, even if you think about it, yeah, you might feel tired after going for a run if you consider yourself a runner, but you know, when you feel great, there's a difference between, oh, I really worked myself and I'm feeling amazing, to okay, I just did something to try and gain the approval of someone else and I've just depleted myself.
Totally. But I think the problem is that because of trauma and because of chronic stress and also conditioning from childhood, a lot of us are dissociated from their bodies. And so we don't have any of that somatic or autonomic awareness, right? And so it's not even our fault. It's just, you know, it's a protective mechanism, right? And so in many ways, I think, yes, the very, very first step should be developing somatic and autonomic awareness. Like, oh, this is what it feels like for me when I'm in sympathetic, when I'm in fight or flight, right? This is where I feel it in my body, right? These are the symptoms, the signals, the messages. And this is what it feels like when I'm in dorsal or when I'm in ventral, you know? And so, and then, yes, feeling that connection to the lower parts of our bodies. A lot of times when we've experienced trauma, we're very disconnected from the belly button down. And so a lot of us are more up here. And then we also strive for practices that keep us up here, Kundalini, and, you know, whatever psychedelic breath work you want to do, or you just kind of basically exit the body even more, right?
Yeah.
And so that's way. Yeah. And so I love combining somatic mindfulness practices with breath work, because in that way, you know, I already have them on the mat wanting to breathe. I'm like, yo, let's connect first, right? Let's really drop into our bodies. Let's feel, can you feel your diaphragm? Can you visualize the diaphragm moving up and down? Can you even sense your organs moving with the diaphragm? You know, things like that, to really connect people to their core again, and their bodies.
Yeah. And, you know, do you consider that kind of identification of, okay, where in your body do you feel that emotion, or where do you feel what you would describe perhaps to someone as that dorsal or that sympathetic state? Is that the first step in somatic? And then do you work to actually physically regulate that? Or did you say it is a combination of breath and physical? How does it work? I'm really interested with somatics. Is it, because obviously somatics, anything with the body movement, so it sort of seems like a huge window to me.
Yeah, totally.
No,
there's so many varieties. Yeah, definitely, for sure. There's so many varieties, really. And yes, there's like the more somatic movement type. I like to do more of the somatic mindfulness type, or, you know, really exploring your felt sense. Is what we talk about as well. A lot felt sense of an emotion, the felt sense of, as I'm talking to you right now, what can I notice, right? And that's, you know, when you're working with a somatic experiencing therapist or something, or, you know, I still have sessions with my therapist every couple of weeks or so. So I'm just working through another layer currently, you know? And so, because the work apparently never stops, but that's what keeps it fascinating. But it's really a lot about, you know, as I talk about something, it's really about, oh, and what do you notice in your body? What is there, you know, and it's really just about, yes, developing the awareness as to, I'm not just talking and up here, but at the same time, I'm staying connected to my body, the sensations of it. So it's a lot about just really, you know, tuning into and connecting to sensations that I can be aware of in my body. And that can be, you know, in so many different ways. So let's say towards the end of a breathwork meditation, I like to invite people for a bit of a gratitude practice, right? And so instead of just saying, oh, now think of something that you're grateful for, I'm like, all right, now just bring to mind something that you're grateful for. And then, you know, feel that feeling of gratitude, you know, or fill your body with that sensation of gratitude. And then where do you feel that gratitude, and what does it feel like? What's the sensation of it? What's the felt sense of gratitude? And so those are sort of first steps to anchor deeper into our bodies and to explore somatics and to really experience certain concepts and modalities. Or like I was just saying with the diaphragm, all right, now we're practicing diaphragmatic breathing in, belly rises, breathing out, belly falls, whatever. And it's like, oh, well, can you actually, it's about slowing down. It's really about slowing down. It's about getting down into the details. Can you become aware and actually sense your diaphragm and the muscle? Can you connect to that sheet of muscle and how it's moving as you inhale and contracting down, and how it moves as you're exhaling? And so it's really zooming in and slowing out on physical sensations in your body, really, for me personally.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's so powerful, but so simple. Like, it just makes me wonder, in the Western world, how many of us are numbing out through being total sensation seekers.
Yeah. I used to be that. I mean, I did all the things and all the drugs and I did all the things to not feel, unless it was feeling amazing and good, but more ecstatic, more, peak experiences. And
that can be dangerous, right? Because when there's a peak high, there has to be a peak low.
Well, let's like Tony Robbins workshops, for example, right? They go from a couple of days to a whole week. And I went to several of his. Exactly. And so what happens is you get there and then it's just like this for a whole week.
Boom,
right?
Boom. Yeah.
And then you come out of it, your nervous system is, you're exhausted. So you're kind of fried. And at the same time, you're not surrounded by all these people anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So you're lacking that connection. And then you crash. At least, the high lasts for a few days and then you crash. And then I would always get sick afterwards. I would always get a cold or whatever, because it was just too much for my nervous system to handle. And
again, obviously we're not dissing anything any of these practitioners are doing. It's great work and it's with such good intention, but it worries me as well in terms of, you see it on Instagram specifically all of the time, so many workshops coming up of like, you can do anything, you can be anything you want to be, which is 100% true, of course, but going for a weekend and screaming, I can be anything I want to be, surrounded by 500 people. The work starts when the 500 people disappear and you're left in a room on your own.
Exactly.
And, are you still no one can sustain that level of energy. It's not possible, sustainable. And it's it wouldn't be a happy life to be like that all the time.
Our bodies, our nervous systems can't take it because we're way too much in sympathetic mode. And that's what happens in a lot of these workshops. And so like what you're saying just now is so true. It's like, we really need to bring it home into our daily practice. And that is so simple that it's so boring for most people out there.
It's so unsexy. This is what I say to so many people. Like the stuff I teach is not sexy. It's not Wim Hof. It's not Kundalini. You don't get a free t-shirt with a mantra on it. One day maybe, but like, it's just, I was like, it just is the practice.
That's what's grounding, right? And so many people that are more dissociated, right? They're, we're chasing the highs because we're also sort of addicted to stress and stress hormones and stuff. And no one is to blame. It's a collective issue. It's and then, so many of us experience trauma in one way or another. So no one is to blame, but that's just the reality of what it looks like on a physiological level, right? And so then when we then introduce more grounding practices, a lot of people might not be ready for it yet to receive that because their nervous system is not ready to receive it.
Yeah.
Right? And then on the other hand, there's all these meditation practices. And I'm like, wow, like so many people struggle to meditate because they have a dysregulated nervous system and they're trying. There's thousands of apps out there to teach people how to meditate. And yet, so many people still struggle to do it. And you're wondering why, right? It's because, well, a little bit of breath work before sitting down to meditate would actually go a long way.
I think a lot of people don't realize that there's even a difference, that meditation is really just sitting and being. And obviously the ultimate goal is nirvana, is that empty mind, etc. But in a world where we're so overstimulated, that goal, if you could even call it a goal, is
samadhi is way, 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 way up the mountain. Let's just get to the start point of the mountain first, you know. And it, you know, really interesting. It struck me as we were talking about Wim Hof earlier, that there's, you know, and obviously I do not diss Wim Hof. I do Wim Hof myself sometimes. I love it, but it has a time and a place. Like, all good for you that you can hold your breath for 4 minutes now. I'm proud of you.
Did I feel good about myself for holding my breath for so long?
You smashed it again. You held your breath for 4 minutes, but I ask you to just sit and breathe lightly in and out through your nose for 30 seconds, and you can't do it because your attention span, and generally people's attention span, is no longer than about 12 to 15 seconds. If that, you know, 7 seconds is
doing bad. With
less than a goldfish, you know, on that Microsoft study. 7 seconds. It's not surprising. You know, I have some clients, of course I won't name them, but very, very high flying business people, and they will admit themselves at this point, because they've come on such a long journey. First session, all I asked them to do, we just start with a bit of breathe light. We did 5-second breath holds. I took their Bolt score. We had a chat about what is functional breathing. They go into breathe light. They lasted maybe 15 seconds. And they just said, I can't be with my own thoughts. Everything that I'm running away from by numbing myself out, by even numbing, you can even run away from personal development using personal development.
Oh, for sure. There's so many ways to bypass, you know, our bodies and to bypass emotions. It's quite fascinating. I mean, there is such a thing as spiritual bypassing, using spirituality to actually bypass our human emotional experience. So yeah, I mean, it's, I guess, slowly, you know, as we spread more awareness around the nervous system, around more down-regulating breathwork practices, hopefully more people will eventually try it out and open themselves up. But yeah, you know, in many ways, I mean, it took me several journeys around the sun to get to breathwork, you know, and to really dive in. But once I did, I was hooked, and I see that with so many people, right? They're very some people just kind of stumble into this work, and then they see that it's not spiritual. And I think Patrick is doing a great job of that as well, you know, especially also with developing the oxygen advantage method, which he keeps saying was his attempt to de-spiritualize the whole thing, to de-woo-woo breathwork and that sort of practice, and to reach more men, right?
Normalize it. Yeah. Normalize.
Yeah, because there were mostly women taking his Buteyko trainings. And so, so hopefully people will see that breathwork is a really, really cool practice. It's cool to be grounded. It's cool to be centered. It's cool to do really boring breathwork practices like light breathing and some coherence breathing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and that in itself, the simplicity of it fascinates me every single day in my own practice.
Me too. I will do breathe light for the rest of my life every single day, because it grounds me. You know, taking my shoes and socks off, walking bare feet on the grass for 10 minutes gives me more energy than an hour yoga class does in some circumstances, depending where I'm starting from. But how can you know where you're starting from unless you actually take the time, which can take years, to develop conscious awareness? So it's all these different ingredients of that sort of grounded personal development cake that really are effective. And something you said there, actually, in that it's a journey. It took you years to even start that journey that really worked for you, and trial and error of, you know, what maybe a previous of each of ourselves would consider a failure actually was just another stepping stone to finding the thing that really worked.
There's no right or wrong. There is no better or worse. And that's why I think we also have to be careful, I guess, is maybe being further down the road with our own experience and trying out all these different modalities to not become too judgmental, right? And because we're all on our own journeys and they're all perfect the way they are, right? Just the way that when I look at someone's breathing pattern, it's perfect the way it is, because it's served itself for, you know, whatever happened to that person, right, into the nervous system. And so and that's why sometimes I'm also like dysfunctional breathing pattern. And like, I don't know, because, you know, it's that every breathing pattern is perfect the way it is, and then we can work on just improving it.
To me, it's just a different choice. Breathwork is just a series of different choices, and you always have a choice in that. But, you know, you need the practitioner to teach you that you actually have a choice and what that different choice might look like and the tools to get there, you know. And and being patient enough and trusting enough to let someone hold your hand and go, let me help you breathe again. And that's freaking vulnerable, right? Because hey, let me teach you how to run a marathon. And that's like, okay, sure. You know, we're going to sweat together. It's going to be painful. No, let me just watch you breathing for 30 seconds and see how you get on.
No, it's so true. So true. And I mean, you know, I was doing yoga for many, many years, and I went to see an osteopath several years ago. And this was before I really dove into breathwork, and he, you know, I was lying down and he was working on me, and he was like, whoa, you have like almost no diaphragmatic breathing going on. And you told me you're a long time yogi and meditator. And I'm like, whoa, that really hit me. My ego was a little bit bruised, you know?
Yeah, literally.
But still at the time, I didn't really understand much about the importance of diaphragmatic breathing and whatnot, you know? And so, so that it keeps coming back to just the importance of educating and sharing, and, you know, educational information, and which is why in that case social media is amazing, because that's one of the best ways we can do that. And so now I mean, it's interesting to observe your own breathing, right? And I mean, I take my HRV every day, and I think it's not about perfectionism. It's not about having the perfect breath, you know, with each breath. It's not about having, you know, a consistently high HRV or something. I think we as instructors especially have really high expectations of ourselves, right? But I think it's a lot about having that awareness, and then seeing, like today I had an HRV of 5 I do the elite HRV with the polo strap, and 5 out of 10, which is like not very amazing. But just having that awareness and knowing, okay, this is what I can do to support my nervous system today, and actually doing it. And then maybe tomorrow I'll get an 8 or something.
And just allowing the journey to happen. 100%. I want to finish just by mentioning and plugging, because your knowledge is amazing, and, you know, just using even just this podcast episode as a vehicle to communicate that, I know will help so many people. But what program are you launching? A new program soon, you said?
I just launched a couple of weeks ago. I launched my new course called Breathwork and Nervous System Foundations, and it's really an intro to, yes, all things, obviously breathing, functional breathing, but also the nervous system, polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, bringing it all together, and how the breath is connected to the nervous system and vice versa, and includes a ton of meditations. I was gonna develop this really tiny course, you know, and then it turned into this bigger thing. And I think there's like, I don't know, 16 different breathing meditations now, and I hope to develop it further. And so, yeah, that's that. If people want to dive in more, then they can explore the course.
Amazing. I'll put the link to it in my show notes, and so anyone listening, if you want to scroll down and just check Connie's course out, go right over. I think, you know, the conversation speaks for itself, that it's going to be absolutely awesome, and that it really is about less is more, keep it simple, and that's where the power lies. So Connie, thank you. Any closing wisdom?
Closing wisdom. Oh boy. You know, in the end, I always just say, and maybe one day I will make a t-shirt with the slogan on it: how you breathe is how you think, how you breathe is how you feel, and how you breathe is how you live. And so, yeah, I'm
into that. Yes. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Georgie.